Hi, welcome to the Hurricane Utah Adult Religion class, sponsored by the Hurricane Utah North Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm Mike Parker, and since 2008, it's been my privilege to be the instructor for this class. The Hurricane Utah Adult Religion class meets on Thursday evenings between September and May to discuss the scriptures, teachings, and history of the restored Church of Jesus Christ. If you live in or are visiting the Hurricane St. George area, I'd love to have you join us. Time and location are available on the class website. There's a link to that in the show notes just below this video. Also on the class website, you can download my notes, which includes footnotes documenting my sources, this PowerPoint presentation, and handouts that I distribute in class. Please note that this YouTube channel and the class website are not official sites of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Hurricane Utah North Stake, or any other church unit or department. I alone am responsible for the content on these sites. What you're about to see is a recording of my notes for one of the lessons. If you enjoy this video, please click the like button and share it with a friend. And please feel free to subscribe if you'd like to be notified when new content is posted to this channel. My friends, the gospel of Jesus Christ is true. Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, and the authority and keys that he held are now vested in the First Presidency and Quorum of the 12 Apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And most importantly, Jesus Christ is the Son of God and the Savior of the world. I hope you enjoy this lesson. We've finished the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. We now move into the historical books of Joshua, Judges, and Ruth. Over the next 3 lessons, we'll review the early history of Israel. We'll begin with the conquest of Canaan and the reign of the judges in this lesson. Through her first kings, Saul and David, in lesson 14, to the reign of Solomon, the partition of the United Kingdom of Israel into 2 separate kingdoms, and the overthrow of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians and the southern kingdom of Judah by the Babylonians in lesson 15. This lesson begins with the book of Joshua. During their 40 years in the wilderness, Moses gave the people of Israel the Lord's law, acted as the Lord's spokesman, and served as Israel's guide. He was the only leader an entire generation of Israelites had known. The Lord took Moses to himself, and a new leader took his place. The Lord raised up Joshua, who directed the conquest and settlement of the promised land of Canaan. Numbers 27, verses 18 through 23, King James Version, quote, "And the Lord said unto Moses, Take thee Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him a charge in their sight. And thou shalt put some of thine honor upon him, that all the congregation of the children of Israel may be obedient. And he shall stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall ask counsel for him after the judgment of Urim before the Lord. At his word shall they go out, and at his word they shall come in, both he and the children of Israel with him, even all the congregation. And Moses did as the Lord commanded him, and he took Joshua and set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and he laid his hands upon him, and gave him a charge, as the Lord commanded by the hand of Moses." Unquote. Who was Joshua? He was from the tribe of Ephraim. His original name was Hosheach, he saves, but Moses renamed him Yahoshuach, Jehovah saves. The Greek form of his name is Jesus, the same name an angel would direct Mary and Joseph to give their child who would be the Christ. Joshua had successfully led the Israelites into battle against the Amalekites. He was also one of the spies Moses had sent into Canaan. Of the 12 spies, only Joshua and Caleb brought back a positive report that encouraged the Israelites to conquer the land. Because of this, These two men were the only ones from the generation that left Egypt who were permitted to enter the promised land of Canaan. Moses and Joshua have some characteristics in common. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. Joshua led the Israelites into Canaan. Moses led Israel in a miraculous crossing of the Red Sea on dry ground. Joshua led Israel in a miraculous crossing of the Jordan River on dry ground. Moses sent spies into Canaan. Joshua sent spies into Jericho. Moses allotted lands east of the Jordan River to the tribes of Israel. Joshua allotted land west of the Jordan River to the tribes of Israel. Before we examine the narrative in the book of Joshua, we need to understand what kind of book it is. Back in lesson 3, I talked about the importance of understanding the genre of the books of the Bible. Every text is written for a specific audience and for a specific purpose. The book of Joshua is in the genre of epic history. It explained to later generations of Israelites how they should understand their relationship to the other peoples in the land of Canaan. It also teaches that, although the Lord had promised the land of Canaan to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, their possession of that land was conditional upon their faith and obedience to his word. An important key to understanding the narrative of Joshua is the ancient Israelite concept of haram. This word is variously translated devoted, set apart, proscribed, accursed, under the ban, or designated for destruction. This Israelite doctrine was set forth in several passages in Deuteronomy, in which the Lord commanded the Israelites to utterly destroy all living people and animals in 7 specific nations in Canaan: Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, and to make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. This was so that they cannot teach you all the abhorrent ways they worship their gods, causing you to sin against the Lord your God. Regarding nations outside of Canaan, the Lord told Israel they should first offer peace terms, under which the nation would pay tribute to Israel and serve them. If a nation refused those terms and went to battle, the Lord commanded Israel to kill the males, but leave the women, children, and animals alive, and take them and anything else in the city as plunder. The 7 Canaanite nations, however, were under haram, a divine ban, because their well-organized religious practices were a serious threat to the exclusive worship of Jehovah. One Old Testament commentary explained haram this way, quote, "Just as there were some types of sacrifices that belonged entirely to the Lord, while others were shared by priest and offerer, so some plunder was set aside as belonging solely to the Lord. Just as the whole burnt offering was entirely consumed on the altar, so the ban mandated total destruction. Since the warfare was commanded by Yahweh and represented his judgment on the Canaanites, the Israelites were on a divine mission with Yahweh as their commander. Since it was his war, not theirs, and he was the victor, the spoil belonged to him." Unquote. Despite the commandment, the Israelites practiced haram sparingly, and the scriptural and archaeological evidence indicates that the Israelites lived among the Canaanites rather than wiping them out completely. Many biblical scholars have therefore concluded that haram was more rhetoric than actual practice. Another mainstream Bible commentary put this into context. Quote, "In Old Testament times, kings went to war and wrote up their victories, attributing their success to their gods. Joshua is Yahweh's victory account, an indispensable part of the narrative of the demonstration of his ownership of the land, and not necessarily realistic. Understood in that way, haram may be seen as belonging to its time and as superseded by other biblical perspectives on God, Old Testament and New Testament, which present him as seeking the salvation of the whole world. Yet the ideas of divine gift, dependence on God, and even judgment find echoes in the New Testament." Unquote. The book of Joshua opens with Israel camped at Abel Shittim, 7 miles or 11 kilometers east of the river Jordan in the plains of Moab. From here, Joshua intended to first take the Canaanite cities of Jericho and Ai. By invading here, instead of advancing round the south of the Dead Sea, Joshua intended to drive a wedge between the Canaanites on the north and those in the south of the country, and thus to prevent a union of all the tribes against him. Before making his opening move, Joshua sent 2 spies into the city of Jericho. After entering the city, they stayed the night at the house of a prostitute named Rahab. When the king of Jericho received intelligence that Israelite spies were in the city, he sent his men to question Rahab. She hid the 2 Israelites on her roof and told the king's men that they had left the city the previous night before the city gates were closed. She then told the Israelite spies that the people of Jericho had heard of the great miracles Jehovah had done for the Israelites, and she knew that the Lord was handing over the land to them. Because she had protected the 2 men, they swore that the Israelite army would spare her life and the lives of her extended family. She let them down from the city wall by a rope, and they spent 3 days hiding from the king's men in the hill country before returning to Joshua with their report. Quote, "Truly, the Lord has given all the land into our hands. Moreover, all the inhabitants of the land melt in fear before us." Unquote. Before the conquest of Canaan began, several notable events took place. The Lord parted the waters of the river Jordan, and the camp of Israel crossed over it on dry ground. All Israelite males born in the wilderness were circumcised. The people of Israel kept the Passover. The Lord stopped sending manna to the Israelites. Joshua had his own burning bush experience. Joshua 5, verses 13 through 15, King James Version, quote, "And it came to pass, when Joshua was by Jericho, that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him, and said unto him, Art thou for us, or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as captain of the host of the Lord am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth, and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so." Unquote. This exchange parallels Moses' first encounter with Jehovah on Mount Sinai. The Lord spoke to Moses from a pillar of fire and told him to, quote, "Remove your sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." Unquote. With this experience, Joshua knew that the Lord was in charge of the situation and was going to bless them with victory over their foes. Before Israel moved against Jericho, the Lord gave Joshua specific instructions on how the attack was to take place. Joshua 6, verses 1 through 5, New American Standard Bible, quote, "Now Jericho was tightly shut because of the sons of Israel. No one went out, and no one came in. The Lord said to Joshua, See, I have given Jericho into your hand, with its king and the valiant warriors. You shall march around the city, all the men of war, circling the city once. You shall do so for 6 days. Also, 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns before the ark. Then on the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priests shall blow the trumpets. It shall be that when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people will go up, every man straight ahead." Unquote. The Lord's instructions were precise, and yet they were completely contrary to typical military siege tactics. The Lord wanted Israel to know that it was He who had knocked down the walls. The Israelites had not accomplished it through their own strength. Israel's obedience was to be an act of faith, and only through their faith would they achieve success. The Lord's instructions to circle the city 7 times held symbolic importance. To ancient Hebrews, the number 7 represented fulfillment or completion. For example, the Sabbath is the 7th day. The trumpets of ram's horns are shofar. These are also sounded each year at the autumn observance of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The ram's horn is softened in hot water and bent into a long, curved shape. It's not able to play a tune, but it can produce several different tones and was used as a signal in warfare and religious observances. The Israelites followed the Lord's instructions. The walls of Jericho fell, and the men of Israel took the city. Rahab and her extended family were saved, as the Israelite spies had covenanted with her. After the victory at Jericho, an Israelite force of 3,000 men marched west and attacked the city of Ai. The initial attack was unsuccessful because one man, Achan, had taken some of the riches of Jericho for himself. After Achan's sin was discovered and he was stoned to death, Israel attacked Ai again with a much larger force and was successful. Joshua offered sacrifices and recommitted all the Israelites to live the law given to Moses. After Israel's first 2 decisive victories, the Gibeonites tricked Joshua into making an oath-bound treaty with them, but Joshua honored the treaty and did not attack them. The 5 Amorite kings of South Canaan banded together and attacked the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites called on the Israelites to fulfill their oath and protect them. Joshua and the army of Israel marched all night from Gilgal. Joshua prayed to the Lord, and the Lord caused the sun and the moon to stand still over the battlefield until the people of Israel had avenged themselves upon their enemies. The Israelites defeated the Amorite armies at Gibeon. The surviving Amorites fled, pursued by the army of Israel. On their retreat between Beth Horon and Azekah, the Lord pelted the Amorites with hailstones. The 5 Canaanite kings pressed on to Makkedah, where they hid in a cave. The Israelites captured them there and executed them. Joshua then completed his campaign in the south, taking the cities of Libnah, Lachish, Eglon, Hebron, and Debir. From there, he and his army took all the remaining lands of the south. The Canaanite kings in the north rallied together to defend against the army of Israel. Joshua and his whole army caught them by surprise at the waters of Merom and attacked them. The Lord handed them over to Israel. The Israelites pursued the routed Canaanites to Sidon and the valley of Mizpeh and destroyed them. Joshua's forces then captured the city of Hazor, burning it to the ground. They then proceeded to take the rest of northern Canaan. The author of the book of Joshua summarized the campaign, quote, "As the Lord commanded Moses, his servant, so did Moses command Joshua, and so did Joshua. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses." Unquote. That was Joshua 11, verse 15. This ended Joshua's war of conquest, although the Israelites had not secured all the land of Canaan, and strife between them and their neighbors continued for several centuries. The conquered lands were divided and allotted to the 12 tribes of Israel. The tribe of Joseph was split into 2 tribes, Ephraim and Manasseh, and the tribe of Levi received no land allotment, although the Levites were assigned cities to live in and grazing lands for their cattle. The tabernacle of the Lord was set up permanently at Shiloh, within the territory allotted to the tribe of Ephraim. Before he died, Joshua had the people of Israel covenant again to serve the Lord. Joshua assembled the people and instructed them. Joshua 24, verses 14 through 18, English Standard Version. Quote, "Now, therefore, fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river Euphrates and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Then the people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us in all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed. And the Lord drove out before us all the peoples, the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore, we also will serve the Lord, for he is our God." Unquote. Elder Marvin J. Ashton of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles taught, quote, "Joshua reminds us of the importance of making decisions promptly. Choose you this day whom ye will serve, but as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Not tomorrow, not when we get ready, not when it is convenient, but this day, straightway, choose whom you will serve. He who invites us to follow will always be out in front of us with his spirit and influence, setting the pace. He has charted and marked the course, opened the gates, and shown the way. He has invited us to come unto him, and the best time to enjoy his companionship is straightway. We can best get on the course and stay on the course by doing as Jesus did. Make a total commitment to do the will of his Father." Unquote. Joshua's final counsel to the Israelites contained the same charge that the Lord had given when he had called Joshua to be a prophet. Be strong and have good courage. This charge applies as much today as it did then, for we are all engaged in the important spiritual battle between good and evil. Turning next to the book of Judges. Israel was united under the prophet Moses for 40 years in the wilderness, and for another 30 years under Joshua in Canaan. After the death of Joshua, Israel did not have a single central leader for several hundred years. Joshua had divided the land of Canaan into lands of inheritance for the tribes of Israel, but not all those territories were secured until the days of David the king, several hundred years later. During the time of the Judges, the only territories that had been completely conquered were the central highlands of Canaan and the area of Gilead, east of the Jordan River. The coastal plain was still held by the Philistines, and the central valleys by various Canaanite tribes. Several passages in the book of Judges state that the Israelites were not successful in taking the coastal plains and inland valleys because their enemies had chariots with iron wheels. The Israelite infantry could take and hold the hill country where chariots could not operate, but on flat lowlands they were unable to achieve victory against a faster, more mobile battle force. But the causes of Israel's difficulties were more than just the lack of a central leader or technological inferiority. As the book of Judges explains, sin and internal conflict were the main hindrances to a complete Israelite victory over the Canaanites. Thus, the book of Judges covers what might be termed Israel's Dark Age. The Hebrew noun translated judge in the King James Bible and most other English Bibles is not entirely accurate. It can refer to someone who makes legal decisions, but it's also applied more broadly to anyone who exercises rule. The Hebrew noun shafat includes the concepts of one who decides, judges, rules, governs, vindicates, and delivers. The duty of the judges was to save the Israelites from their enemies and maintain peace among the various tribes. They were to dispense absolute impartial justice and not take bribes. They were to protect widows, orphans, and strangers. They were not to allow themselves to be unduly influenced by popular opinion or the plight of the poor. The book of Judges names 12 individuals who served in this role. 6 judges, Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah, and Samson, functioned as military leaders and traditionally have been called the major judges. The other 6, Shamgar, Tolah, Jair, Ibzan, Elon, and Abdon, are often called the minor judges because so little is recorded about them. The 13th major character in the book is Abimelech, who was a would-be king, not a judge. The book of Judges begins with a review of the Israelites' conquest of Canaan. Judges gives a somewhat different view of the conquest than the one we read in the book of Joshua. Joshua portrays the conquest as a unified action under a single leader, while Judges describes the tribes as acting independently. Rather than taking and holding a comparatively large amount of territory, as described in the book of Joshua, the territory controlled by the Israelites in the book of Judges was much more limited. The tribes of Judah and Simeon took and held the south, while the united house of Joseph conquered Bethel. The other tribes, however, failed to drive out the Canaanite inhabitants of their territories. An angel of the Lord told the Israelites that this failure was due to their disobedience to the Lord's commandments. The first major portion of the book begins with an explanation of the cycle of sin, punishment, repentance, deliverance that takes place across the narrative. This is the same cycle that we're familiar with from the Book of Mormon. The individual judges are treated in order, beginning with Othniel, Ehud, Shamgar, and Deborah. The Song of Deborah and Barak in chapter 5 is a priceless piece of ancient Hebrew poetry. The narrative continues with Gideon and Abimelech. Abimelech was the son of righteous Gideon. Rather than serve as a judge, he declared himself to be a king. Abimelech's story is a turning point in the narrative. The judges before him were righteous and helped secure peace for Israel. The judges after him were unrighteous, tragic, or ineffective, and they allowed Israel to fall into sin and suffer military defeats. They were Tolah, Jair, Jephthah, Ibzan, Elon, Abdon, and Samson. Samson is one of the most famous tragic figures in the Bible. Born by divine intervention, he took upon himself the strict vows of a Nazirite and received great strength from the Lord. But his pride and arrogance got the better of him. He married a Philistine woman and had a sexual liaison with another Philistine, Delilah, who betrayed him. Samson came to an ignominious end when he pulled the Philistine temple of Dagon down upon himself and his captors. His story is an epic cautionary tale. The last 5 chapters of Judges recount a series of abominations that threatened to tear the Israelites apart. The first story relates the events that led to the establishment of an idolatrous worship center in the tribal area of Dan. The second story concerns the brutal assault on and death of a Levite concubine at the hands of a group of Benjamites and the resulting Israelite civil war that almost entirely wiped out the tribe of Benjamin. These stories underscore the author's belief in the importance of having a king who could unify Israel and prevent this type of gross immorality. They set the stage for the introduction of Saul early in the book of 1 Samuel. With that outline of the book of Judges, let's look at a few specific passages, starting with the description of how Israel's cycle of apostasy began. Judges 2, verses 7 through 10, King James Version, quote, "And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord that he did for Israel. And Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnath Heres, in the Mount of Ephraim, on the north side of the hill Gaash. And also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers. And there arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel." Unquote. The generation that came after Joshua was faithless and unbelieving. The foundation for their decline was laid when the Israelites failed to drive out the Canaanites who lived in the lands claimed by Israel. We see the same pattern in the Book of Mormon. After the death of King Benjamin, who had taught his people the words he had received from an angel, many of the rising generation that could not understand the words of King Benjamin, being little children at the time he spake unto his people, and they did not believe the tradition of their fathers. Elder Robert D. Hales of the Quorum of the 12 taught that, quote, "It is our imperative duty to help youth understand and believe the gospel in a deeply personal way. We can teach them to walk in the light, but that light cannot be borrowed. They must earn it for themselves. They must obtain their own light of testimony directly from the source of spiritual light, God himself, through prayer and study and pondering. They must understand who they are and who Heavenly Father wants them to become." Unquote. Judges 2, verses 11 through 13, King James Version. Quote, "And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Baalim. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, of the gods of the people that were around about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth." Unquote. Virtually all people in the ancient Near East, including the indigenous peoples of Canaan, recognized many different gods and kept small figurines of them in their homes and places of worship. The two gods who appear most prominently in the Old Testament are Baal was the Canaanite storm and fertility god. The name means lord, designating a legal state of ownership or social superiority. In a land dependent on rain-fed agriculture, the storm god is the most significant deity in the culture. The symbol for Baal was the bull, which represents fertility. Ashtart was the Canaanite goddess of fertility, sexuality, and war. She was the female equivalent of Baal, and possibly his consort. These two gods appear throughout Israel's history as opponents of Jehovah, the God of Israel. We're going to see them again in future lessons. Judges 2, verses 14 through 15, New English Translation. Quote, "The Lord was furious with Israel and handed them over to robbers who plundered them. He turned them over to their enemies who lived around them. They could not withstand their enemies' attacks. Whenever they went out to fight, the Lord did them harm, just as he had warned and solemnly vowed he would do. They suffered greatly." Unquote. When we are disobedient, the Lord will not bless or prosper us. If we are outright rebellious, however, the Lord may actively work against us to chasten us and bring us to repentance. Judges 2, verses 16 through 19, New English Translation. Quote, "The Lord raised up leaders who delivered them from these robbers, but they did not obey their leaders. Instead, they prostituted themselves to other gods and worshiped them. They quickly turned aside from the path their ancestors had walked. Their ancestors had obeyed the Lord's commands, but they did not. When the Lord raised up leaders for them, the Lord was with each leader and delivered the people from their enemies while the leader remained alive. The Lord felt sorry for them when they cried out in agony because of what their harsh oppressors did to them. When the leader died, the next generation would again act more wickedly than the previous one. They would follow after other gods, worshiping them and bowing down to them. They did not give up their practices or their stubborn ways." Unquote. In the King James Version, verse 17 says the Israelites went a-whoring after other gods. The New English Translation translates this passage, they prostituted themselves to other gods. This expression appears 18 times in the Old Testament. What is the significance of this particular allusion? Why would the Old Testament writers use it so frequently? Adultery is one of the most serious sins. It is an offense not just against God, but also against the spouse to whom one has made solemn covenants. The Lord views adultery not just as a sin, but also as a violation of his covenant. This metaphor is also found in the New Testament, where the Lord's church is represented as a virgin bride, with Christ as the bridegroom, while Satan's followers are, symbolically, the whore or prostitute. Judges 2, verses 20 through 23, New English Translation. Quote, "The Lord was furious with Israel. He said, 'This nation has violated the terms of the agreement I made with their ancestors by disobeying me. So I will no longer remove before them any of the nations that Joshua left unconquered when he died.' Joshua left those nations to test Israel. I wanted to see whether or not the people would carefully walk in the path marked out by the Lord, as their ancestors were careful to do. This is why the Lord permitted these nations to remain and did not conquer them immediately. He did not hand them over to Joshua." Unquote. Israel was not simply unsuccessful in driving out the Canaanites from the land. The Lord allowed them to remain in the land to test the Israelites and see if they would be faithful to the covenant they had made with the Lord. Let's look at two examples of righteous judges, starting with Deborah. Key individuals in this story include Jabin, a king of Canaan who oppressed Israel for 20 years, Sisera, captain of Jabin's army and leader of an army of 900 chariots, Deborah, whose name means honeybee, she was a judge of Israel, Barak, whose name means lightning, he was the leader of a 10,000-man army of the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun, Heber, a pro-Israelite Kenite who lived peacefully near Jabin, and his wife, Jael. Judges 4, verses 4 through 9 and 14, King James Version. Quote, "And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidot, she judged Israel at that time. And she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. And she sent and called Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kedesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun? And I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. And Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with thee, notwithstanding the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor, for the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose, and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Deborah said unto Barak, Up, for this is the day in which the Lord hath delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. The Lord gave Barak's army the victory over Sisera's army. Sisera fled and hid in the tent of Heber the Kenite, but Heber's wife, Jael, took a hammer and drove a tent peg through Sisera's head while he was sleeping. In verse 4, Deborah is called a prophetess. Other prophetesses in the scriptures include Moses' sister, Miriam, Huldah, a prophetess during the time of King Josiah, the unnamed wife of the prophet Isaiah, and the widow Anna, who recognized the infant Jesus as the Messiah. What is a prophetess? In response to the question, who is a prophet, President Joseph F. Smith said, quote, "The world has a very peculiar notion of what a prophet is. They think that the whole duty of a prophet is merely to foretell what is going to take place, that prophecy is the relating of future events, but that is only one of the duties of a prophet." In Revelation 19, verse 10, the angel of the Lord declared to John that the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and the prophet Joseph Smith has declared that every man who has come into this church, and every woman for that matter, who has received the testimony of the Spirit of the Lord is a prophet or a prophetess. That every man should be a prophet, because every man in the church should have the testimony of Jesus, which is the spirit of prophecy, and he should declare the truth, teach the principles of the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, call upon the people to repent of their sins, and instruct them in the things of the kingdom. This is the duty of a prophet, and constitutes the office and calling of a prophet just as much as the declaration of things which are yet to come. Unquote. Gideon was another righteous judge of Israel. The people of Israel were overwhelmed by the Midianites, who invaded the land, destroyed their crops, and stole their livestock. The Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he sent an angel who called Gideon to be leader of the armies of Israel. Gideon is yet another example of a man with poor self-image who questioned his worthiness to serve. When the angel called him to lead Israel against the Midianites, he responded, quote, "How can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." Unquote. After cleansing his father's house of idols, Gideon called on several tribes of Israel to fight with him. 32,000 men answered the call. The Lord commanded Gideon to reduce numbers in his army with an unusual test. He was told to command his army to go to the river to drink. Judges 5, verse 7, English Standard Version, quote, "Every one who laps the water with his tongue, as a dog laps, you shall set by himself. Likewise, every one who kneels down to drink." Unquote. 300 men lapped with their tongues. With just those 300 men, Gideon was able to rout the entire Midianite army. Finally, we're going to look briefly at the book of Ruth. Although it's one of the shortest books in the Old Testament, the story in Ruth is one of the most moving in the scriptures, and it deserves far more time than I can give it in this already overstuffed lesson. Ruth is another in a series of non-Israelite women who were made partakers of the covenant. She joins such mixed company as Tamar, the Canaanite woman who had to deceive Judah in order to get him to honor his duties to her under levirate marriage, and Rahab, the Canaanite prostitute who sheltered the Israelite spies in the city of Jericho. Tamar, Rahab, and Ruth were all ancestors of David, the king, and Jesus, the Messiah. Recapping the story of Ruth. Naomi and her husband Elimelech were Israelites and members of the tribe of Judah. They moved to Moab, east of the Dead Sea, during a famine. Their two sons, Machlon and Chilion, married Moabite women, Ruth and Orpah. Elimelech and his two sons died, leaving Naomi, Ruth, and Orpah as widows. With their prospects bleak, Naomi ordered her daughters-in-law to return to their parents' homes in Moab. Orpah, with sadness and regret, returned to her home, but Ruth refused to leave Naomi. Naomi pleaded with Ruth again, but Ruth refused, telling her, quote, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. Unquote. That was the English Standard Version of Ruth 1, verses 16 and 17. Naomi returned to Bethlehem, her hometown, with Ruth. With Naomi's help and counsel, Ruth courted and married Boaz, a distant relation of Naomi's deceased husband. Boaz and Ruth had a son, Obed, who became the grandfather of King David. Ruth is a brief, personal, intimate portrait, rather than a grand sweeping narrative like the books of Joshua and Judges. It's a moving story of love and loyalty, an affirmation that one can be an Israelite by choice and not just by birth, and an important connection in the lineage of King David and Jesus of Nazareth. That concludes this lesson. If you enjoyed it, please click the thumbs up button and leave a comment below. Please subscribe if you'd like to be notified when new lessons are posted to this channel, and visit www.huarc.org to download these notes and this slideshow. In the next lesson, we'll read about the calling of Samuel as high priest over Israel and of Saul and David, Israel's first two kings. The reading is 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. See you next week.